That night in Manhattan, a soft drizzle fell, and neon lights reflected across the glistening streets. The Davenport Hotel towered like a fortress of light, a place where the wealthy wrapped themselves in the illusion of power. Inside the grand lobby, crystal chandeliers poured glittering light across marble floors. But in one quiet corner, a baby's cries shattered the silence. Maria Rivera, a Latina maid in her navy blue uniform, sat on a wooden chair near the tall window. In her arms was a newborn, his little face red and wet with tears. Maria rocked gently, humming a Spanish lullaby, her hand stroking the baby's soft hair. "Shh, tranquilo, pequeño. You're safe," she whispered. The baby quieted slightly, snuggling closer, searching for warmth. The front doors suddenly swung open with force, and footsteps echoed across the marble. Arthur Davenport, the hotel magnate, stormed in. A tall man with slick silver hair, dressed in a flawless black tuxedo, his cold eyes cut through the room like steel. He stopped, and the sight before him made his blood boil. "What the hell is this?" Arthur roared, his voice filling the grand hall. Maria froze but held the baby tighter, refusing to flinch. "Sir, the child wouldn't stop crying. Only what?" he snapped, stepping closer, his finger shaking as he pointed at her. "You think you have that right? In my house? With my bloodline?" Maria lowered her eyes but kept her tone steady. "He was hungry. I couldn't let him suffer." Arthur slammed his palm against a marble pillar. The sharp crack echoed, and the baby wailed louder, trembling. "Hungry? That's your excuse? Do you know what people would say if they found out? A Davenport heir, nursed by a maid?" The air grew heavier, charged with rage and shame. Maria rocked the infant gently, whispering softly, shielding him from the thunder of Arthur's voice. Then the words cut through the air like poison. "You will make my son black." Silence. The baby whimpered against Maria's chest. Her body stiffened, but when she raised her head, her eyes no longer carried fear. They burned with something deeper. Defiance. Dignity. Arthur leaned closer, spitting his words. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what this family name means? A century of Davenport pride. And you—" He jabbed his finger toward her, trembling. "You dare to touch it?" Maria didn't answer. She simply rocked the child, as if his cries were the only voice she would listen to. That silence stung more than any insult, cutting Arthur's pride open. "Answer me!" he shouted, his voice cracking, betraying the storm inside him. "You're trying to take her place, aren't you? You think you can replace his mother?" Maria finally spoke, her voice steady but soft. "He has no mother. I only gave what you could not." Arthur stumbled back a step, the weight of her words striking harder than any blow. The rain tapped harder against the tall windows, neon lights spilling across the floor. In that vast, glittering lobby, a quiet war had begun. Power against love, pride against compassion. The Davenport Hotel loomed like a monument of power in the heart of Manhattan, its glass facade glowing against the misty drizzle of a restless city. Limousines purred outside, valets bowed, and inside the grand lobby, crystal chandeliers rained light over the marble floors. To the world, it was a palace of wealth. But behind those golden walls, a storm was brewing. Maria Rivera sat alone in the staff lounge, a dimly lit corner near the east wing. She was only 30, yet her tired eyes carried decades of struggle. In her arms was an infant, fragile, restless, hungry. The child whimpered, his small fists waving in the air. Maria held him close, whispering in Spanish, her voice trembling but gentle. "Shh, pequeño. Tranquila. You are safe with me." The baby's cries softened as he found warmth against her chest. Maria stroked his hair, her thoughts drifting to her own daughter, the little girl she lost years ago to a fever medicine couldn't cure. That hollow ache had never left her, and now, holding this baby, it returned, not as pain, but as a fierce instinct. No child should suffer hunger, not while she still breathed. The door slammed open with a thunderclap. Arthur Davenport, the patriarch himself, stormed inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, draped in a tuxedo worth more than Maria's yearly salary, his silver hair gleamed under the dim lights. His face was crimson with fury, and his eyes locked on the sight before him, his maid nursing his heir. "What the hell is this?" Arthur's voice boomed, making the very walls tremble. Maria froze but didn't release the baby. "Sir, he was crying. He needed. Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. He strode forward, his polished shoes striking the floor like hammers. "Do you know who this child is? He is a Davenport, my son, my legacy, and you." His finger shook as he pointed. "You dare put your hands, your body, on him?" Maria looked down at the child, rocking him softly. Her lips trembled, but her voice was calm. "He was hungry. I could not let him suffer." Arthur's palm slammed against the marble pillar with a sickening crack. The baby startled and cried louder, his tiny face scrunching in distress. Arthur's chest heaved. "Hungry? That's your excuse? Do you know what people will say when they find out? The Davenport name? Tainted. My son, fed by—" He choked on his own rage, his words dripping with venom. "You will make my son black." The words slashed through the air like a blade. Maria stiffened, the room falling into a suffocating silence. The baby whimpered, pressing closer to her, as if instinctively shielding himself from the storm. Maria's eyes lifted, no longer timid. They burned with a quiet fire. Arthur snarled, pacing like a caged lion. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand the power of this family name? For a century we have stood above the rest. We are not like—" He cut himself short, his hands trembling. "And you sit there in your uniform, acting like you belong, like you can replace her." Maria's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the room. "He has no mother. And you—" She looked him dead in the eye. "You were not here." Arthur staggered, the words striking deeper than any insult. "Watch your mouth!" he barked, but his voice cracked, betraying the weakness seeping in. Maria rocked the baby slowly, her gaze steady, her tone sharp as glass. "Watch your son. Last night, when his cries filled this house, where were you? Behind your locked door, drowning in bourbon while your child starved. You call yourself a father. A father is presence, a father is touch. And right now—" She leaned forward, her voice cutting like a blade. "I am more of a father than you are." Arthur's face flushed crimson. His fists curled, but his breath faltered. For years, he had crushed rivals in boardrooms with a single glare, but here he stood, disarmed by the quiet defiance of a maid. "You think silence shames me?" he rasped, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can sit there, holding what is mine, and make me the villain?" Maria wiped a droplet of milk from the baby's cheek and looked up, her eyes glistening but unwavering. "Villain? No, not yet. But look at yourself, Arthur Davenport. You are a man terrified of a newborn. You shout about skin, about legacy, about what people will think. But your son knows none of that. He knows hunger, he knows comfort. And tonight, comfort came from me, not you." The baby sighed softly, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Maria pressed a kiss to his forehead, whispering, "Duérmete, mi cielo." Arthur's breath hitched. His body swayed as though her words had pulled the ground from beneath him. He pressed his hand to the wall for balance, his once mighty shoulders trembling. "You scream about pride," Maria continued, her voice softer now but heavier with truth. "But pride does not feed a child. Pride does not wipe away tears in the night. Pride will not hold him when he cries." Her words echoed in the marble chamber. For the first time in decades, Arthur Davenport, the untouchable billionaire, felt the walls of his fortress crumble. Maria stood taller, cradling the sleeping child like she carried the weight of truth itself. "You call me a maid," she said quietly, "but tonight, I am the only one who acted like family." The silence that followed was suffocating. Arthur's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes burned with something unfamiliar, not rage, not arrogance, but shame. His fists loosened at his sides. His empire, his name, his wealth, none of it mattered against the simple truth lying in her arms. For the first time, the mighty billionaire broke. His voice cracked as he whispered, "God help me." His eyes glistened, his chest heaved, and the man who once commanded empires looked smaller than ever before. And Maria, the maid he had dismissed all his life, stood taller than him, not with wealth or power, but with compassion. The war between pride and love had only just begun. Arthur sat heavily in the velvet armchair, his breath ragged, his hands pressed into his face as if he could hide from the truth Maria had thrown at him. The chandelier light trembled above, its reflection bouncing in the polished marble floor like shattered fragments of his once unshakable pride. The baby stirred in Maria's arms, a soft whimper breaking the silence. She rocked him gently, whispering in Spanish lullabies that Arthur couldn't understand, yet their meaning cut through him more sharply than any boardroom insult. Comfort, love, care, the three things his billions could not buy. Why? His voice broke the stillness, raw and hoarse. Why do you care? He is not your blood. He is mine. Mine to protect, mine to raise. And yet... His hands fell from his face, his eyes bloodshot, hollow. And yet I don't know how. Maria's gaze softened, though her arms stayed firm around the sleeping child. She didn't answer right away. She let his question linger in the room, heavy as the weight of centuries of prejudice and power. Finally, she said, "Because he deserves it. Because every child deserves it." Arthur swallowed hard. His throat felt like sandpaper. "I've built empires. I've fought governments. I've destroyed rivals. But when I look at him..." His voice cracked, his chest heaved, and he lowered his eyes. "I'm terrified. Terrified he'll need something I cannot give." Maria stepped closer, the baby cradled against her shoulder. She spoke not with anger now, but with a quiet strength that made her words cut deeper. "He doesn't need your empire. He doesn't need your fortune. He doesn't need marble floors or crystal chandeliers. He needs arms that hold him when he cries. He needs a father who shows up. That's all." Arthur's breath caught. He looked at his son, his tiny hand curled into a fist, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt like forgiveness itself. Tears blurred his vision, spilling down the creases of a face once hardened by arrogance. "I don't know if I can," he whispered, his voice trembling like a child's. Maria's eyes glistened, her own pain surfacing. "I buried my little girl before she could say my name. I never got the chance to be there for her. So when I heard him crying, when I saw him alone..." She closed her eyes briefly, her voice breaking. "I couldn't let another child feel the silence that broke me." Arthur staggered to his feet, his legs weak, his pride shattered. He reached out, hesitantly, as though his own son were too fragile for his unworthy hands. "May I..." His voice cracked. Maria studied him for a long, heavy moment. Then, with a firmness that carried both trust and warning, she placed the child gently into his trembling arms. Arthur gasped softly, his son's weight barely 5 pounds, yet heavier than any burden he had ever carried. The baby stirred, opened his eyes, blue, fragile, trusting, and fixed his gaze on Arthur. For the first time since his wife's death, Arthur Davenport felt something break open inside him. A dam of grief, of fear, of arrogance, crumbled in seconds. His lips trembled, his chest heaved, and tears fell freely onto his son's soft blanket. "I'm here," Arthur whispered, his voice raw and unsteady. "I'm here, my boy. I won't fail you again." He pressed his cheek against the child's tiny head, his body shaking with sobs. "I don't care what the world says. I don't care about legacy, about pride, about skin. You're my son, my blood, my everything." Maria turned away, her own tears falling silently. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire tyrant, not the man blinded by prejudice, but a father broken open by love he had feared too long to feel. The house, once echoing with emptiness, now pulsed with something new, something fragile, but real. Days passed, then weeks. Arthur changed in small, quiet ways that spoke louder than any speech. He attended every feeding. He rocked his son to sleep when nightmares clawed at him. He learned to change diapers with clumsy hands that once only signed million-dollar deals, and when the boardroom called, he let them wait. For the first time in his life, he understood that nothing, no empire, no fortune, was greater than the tiny heartbeat he now cherished above all. The staff whispered of a different Arthur Davenport. Less rage, more presence. Less pride, more humanity. And Maria, still working by his side, no longer carried only the burden of silence. She carried the quiet triumph of having forced open a heart once encased in steel. One evening, as the sun dipped below Manhattan's skyline, Arthur stood at the window, his son in his arms. Maria stood nearby, folding blankets. He turned to her, his voice steady, but heavy with humility. "You saved him. You saved me. I can't erase what I said, what I believed. But I will never forget what you showed me. From this day forward, you're not just the maid of this house. You are family." Maria's lips parted in shock, but before she could answer, Arthur bowed his head, not to a board, not to a rival, but to her. In that moment, dignity replaced humiliation. Love replaced prejudice. And in the quiet of a grand mansion, two unlikely souls rebuilt not just a family, but a future. For the first time, the Davenport name no longer stood for wealth alone. It stood for change, for redemption, for a love that refused to bow to fear. And as Arthur rocked his son to sleep, the baby's tiny fingers curled around his, the message was clear. Blood may define heritage, but love defines family.